Welcome to That Backyard Property Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Killiner, and I'm a father, a husband, and a mortgage broker. Our goal is to inspire, educate, and empower people through property. Whether you're a first home buyer, whether you're looking to upgrade or downsize or invest in property, then we're here to help you. Each week, we'll have a special guest that's an expert in their field, and they'll guide us through all of your questions that you might have, plus a lot of other information. So let's do this. Welcome back to another episode of That Backyard Property Pod. Today, I am pumped. I've been wanting to get this person on the podcast for a little while now. He is a CEO, he's a founder, he's a dad, he's a husband, and he's an influencer. Mr. Tony Hayek himself, welcome.
Thank you, mate. Good to be here. Came a long way. This is the furthest I've ever travelled to be on a podcast, I want to tell you.
I know, flying you in from the East Coast. It's a different country over there.
It is a different country. I feel it now. It's, well, whatever it is now, I feel like it's evening now. I'm ready for bed.
Yeah, mate, 3-hour time difference, it gets you. CEO of Blue Wealth Property. We will dissect and delve into a lot of stuff today about property itself, what home means to you, what you're proud of, your team. You've built a wonderful portfolio, team, culture, all like there's so much to unpack. Who is Tony, first of all, and what could we say about Tony first, and then we'll delve into it.
That's a great question, actually. I'm not sure I've ever been asked it that way. I suppose, probably a little bit corny, but the first thing that comes to mind is that I'm a dad.
Yeah.
Three kids, Joseph, who's almost 19, Ben, who's 17, and Sarah, who's almost 16.
Yeah.
So, three beautiful kids, married to my wife of the same name.
What, Tony?
Tony. My wife's name is Tony.
That's fantastic.
So, Tony and Tony.
Yeah.
And it's neither of our names are short for anything.
Yeah.
We're both Tonys.
There
you go. We just celebrated 20 years. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm very grateful for the fact that my parents are still around.
Yeah.
Dad's 79 now, I think, and Mum's 76, turning 77. So I'm very grateful for them being around. There's not many people I know of my age. I'm 51 now. Not many people of my age that I know that still have both their parents. So for that, I'm very grateful. I've got a great relationship with my siblings. I'm the eldest of three. Yeah. So my sister Carol, who's the smartest one in the family, just submitted her PhD. So there'll be 2 out of 3 of us who've got PhD. So my little brother, who's probably the most successful.
I didn't have enough fingers, but I forgot PhD. Lucky you mentioned it.
So, well, it's, I think you've known me long enough to know it's, there's no preciousness around it, but whenever I say that, people laugh. I'm like, my sister is definitely the smartest in the family. Yeah. I've got a great relationship with my siblings, and I'm very grateful for all that. That's the stuff that's really important.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the dad first, because when we first met, and there's certain moments that you remember when you meet someone, and one of those moments was we connected, and it was like, nice to meet you. I'm a dad. It's like, great. And then you just went straight into, and my daughter's done this, and you showed me a photo, and how proud you were of showing me the photo of your daughter about she was doing dance or something.
It was a dance concert.
Dance concert.
She'd be mortified, by the way.
Yeah.
Lucky she doesn't watch podcasts on property, because I'd be in big trouble.
Oh, and just watching how proud you, like the facial expression you had, and I was like, oh, I like this guy. Oh, I like this guy.
Thank you, mate. It was very mutual.
Yeah. And so I usually start off the episodes with talking about what home means, because we talk about property, we talk about all of those macro things, but we're going, well, hang on, what does home mean?
It's a really great question. I actually love that question. It's probably it's a little bit unique in my mind. The first thing that comes to mind, obviously, whenever you talk about home, people would think of a whole bunch of different things, the home they live in, the home they came from, the home they grew up in, their grandparents' home, which is always full of love and support. To me, it brings back a story from my childhood. So I was born in Melbourne, raised in Sydney, and when I was 11, so as I said, I'm the eldest of 3 children. my dad decided that he was going to move us back to his motherland. Yeah, so mum and dad immigrated. My dad in the late 60s, my mum in the early 70s. They met here, got married here. They got married in February of 1973. I was born in November of 1973, so you run the maths. They were born...
Shotgun wedding.
They were married... Well, I worked out the maths. Yeah. They were married on the 3rd of Feb, and I was born on the 30th of November, so they got a honeymoon baby.
Yeah.
Honeymoon baby. And then my sister was born 11 months later, so they were in a mad hurry. But Dad decided, after being a small businessman and stereotypically, ethnic family, owned a fruit shop in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, saved a lot of money, and decided he was going to move back. So his intention when he left, and my parents are of Lebanese descent. Yeah. So when he left Lebanon and left, 6 siblings and his parents, his intention was always to go back.
On his own?
He left on his own. When you look at that now, I always say to my children, kiss the feet that your grandparents walk on, because what they sacrificed to give their family a better future is unimaginable. Like imagine leaving your family, your parents, your siblings, your friends, going to the other side of the country where you don't speak the language. There's no internet, there's no FaceTime, there's no email, there's no phones. Yeah. Like it's unfathomable to us. Yeah? Our generation doesn't actually understand it.
But might not even know where it is on a map.
Not even. Wouldn't know where it is on a map. Yeah. So in those days, I'd measure it by travel time. Yeah. To get there, it's going to take 6 weeks or whatever it was. I think my dad came over on a boat, and I think my mum came over on a plane.
Do you know what triggered the...
So my dad joined the army. It was just a lack of opportunity. Yeah. So my dad, he was always relatively ambitious. He was always a smart kid. My grandfather was a cow trader. He used to walk cows. Yeah. So I don't know what they call so a shepherd is one who walks sheep. Yeah. Well, I don't know what they call the bloke who walks the cows. But anyway, I probably should find out.
I was trying to think of something witty, but I couldn't say.
Yeah, I don't know. So the cowman walks the cows. He used to walk the cows from northern Lebanon to Syria and sell them and then hitchhike back. And in order to manage the flock, if a bunch of cows is called a flock, probably should have got my terminology right. My dad was one of 5 boys, so he used to pull his sons out of school to help him, as my dad would say, shovel shit. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So Dad actually loved school, wanted to learn. And so he then started to live vicariously through us. Yeah. Right? Education was massive in our household. And I wasn't a very good school student. Yeah. I had my moments, I failed my HSC. I ended up at Newcastle University because that was the only university that took me. I got into an arts degree, and then that turned into a decade of university study. But going back to the original story, when we went back to Lebanon, there are so many stories I could tell you, and we probably don't have enough time for them. We got hijacked on the way over. Right? So one of my mates calls me Tony Hayek. Right? We got hijacked on the way over. I'll show you the little media report that I found. It's beautiful with Google and stuff these days, what you can find. But cut a long story short, we got hijacked on the way over. Yeah. And, we're little kids, we're little Aussie kids. We'd never seen any. The worst violence we'd ever seen was when someone punched someone in the schoolyard. Like, or when we copped the belting from our parents.
So innocent.
We really were. And I didn't realise as a child how innocent we were until I went to a war-torn country. Yeah. And so we went over there and spent about 15 or 16 months. Dad took basically his life savings over, right? Everything he'd come here and worked with, him and Mum, they essentially worked their backsides off, right? Yeah. Went over there. Dad travelled to Germany and bought a dry cleaning machine, which back then was state of the art, right, in the 1980s. And he bought himself a Volkswagen van. Yeah. And he started a mobile dry cleaning pickup service around the villages of northern Lebanon, right? So you talk about entrepreneurship.
That's amazing.
Amazing, really is. So he used to basically drive through, and he had this big horn, think Dukes of Hazzard, and he'd hit the horn, and everyone would know that was the dry cleaning guy. It was like the ice cream siren, right? All the ice cream music. People would run out with their bag of dry cleaning, and he'd throw it in the back of the van, and he'd dry clean it and bring it back a couple of days later and take the cash and see you later. That was his business. Yeah. Anyway, through the process of us being over there, there was a bit of family conflict. Dad's someone who doesn't really like people getting into his business. Yeah, he likes people to mind. He minds his own business. He wants you to mind your own business. So his parents were very intrusive. And why is your son doing this? And why is your wife doing that? And the Lebanese society is amazing in the fact that it's a very supportive, loving, collectivist community. Yeah. But that's also its downside. It's a double-edged sword.
Especially if you're private.
In difficult times, you get lots of love and support, but then nobody ever minds their own business. Everyone wants to know your business. Yeah, so that's the double-edged sword of the collectivist societies. So we're on our way to school one day, and we used to go to school in Tripoli, right? Because Mum and Dad wanted us to maintain our English speaking, and in Tripoli, which was the biggest city closest to where we were, essentially from the country. Drove down there. Guy used to pick us up every morning, and it'd be like an hour and a half drive to Tripoli. And when we drove into Tripoli, and some fighting broke out, as in war fighting, and a car bomb exploded not far from our bus. Yeah. Anyway, the windows on the bus shattered. Right now, news had got back to the village. Yeah, you're talking about what home means to me. News had got back to the village that there was fighting in Tripoli, and of course no mobile phones, no "Are you guys okay?" No, nothing. Right. So Mum and Dad are in the village, knowing that fighting has broken out in Tripoli, and their 3 children were on their way to school. Yeah. There's been a car bomb explosion. There are some dead people, and they don't know.
You remember this?
I remember it. I was 11. Yeah. If you ask my sister, she'll tell the story differently. Yeah. So what I'm recalling is my memory of it. Yeah. And she's actually much better with dates and details and whatever. My brother is 4 years younger than me. He doesn't remember it as much, as vividly. But what I do remember is the emotion of it. Yeah, the fear and the people screaming, and we'd never experienced anything like that. Yeah, some of the kids that were in the bus were cool. Yeah, they'd heard this before. They'd been there before. Yeah. And we got back to the village hours and hours later, and I couldn't even tell you. If my sister was here, she could tell you how long it was, but I couldn't tell you. But my memory of it was a long time, and then my mother just broke down. Yeah. Hard to tell the story.
Yeah.
It's always been a lot harder to tell the story since I had children.
Yeah,
because I can sort of feel my mum and dad's pain. Yeah. Anyway, pull myself together. A few of these things sort of led to mum and dad going, what are we doing? Yeah. We've just left this amazing, safe, incredible country and come back to this. And you know what? Still remember when my dad sat next to me on the lounge outside and said to me, "Do you want to go home?" So,
how long were you in Lebanon then for?
That was home. Yeah. So when he said, "Do you want to go home?" we'd moved there to be home.
Yeah.
But really, Australia was always home. Yeah. We were there for about 15 or 16 months from memory. I know that we flew over there in July because the hijack report that I found had the date on it. I think it was the 4th of July or something. I'll show you. It's on my phone. I'll show you later. So we must have come back in sort of spring of 86 maybe. Yeah. So we came back, and it was a bit of a recession at the time, and the property market was dead, certainly in Sydney. Mum and Dad owned a house in Guildford, which is in the western suburbs of Sydney. Yeah. And Dad left every dollar he'd ever made in Lebanon in that dry cleaner. Yeah. And the whole time we were in Lebanon, my uncle, who was his only sibling that lived in Australia, who'd followed my dad out to Australia, was charged with the responsibility of selling this property. Yeah. And he just couldn't sell it. Just as we were about to return, or before we made the decision to return, they had a sale. Yeah. Right? So someone bought it. Mm. So the way the story was told to me, and probably if I look into it, it wasn't absolutely correct, but the way my uncle told me the story at the time was that he had to negotiate her out of the contract. Yeah. Yeah? And because it was a soft market, I think it was probably relatively easy, I'd say. I don't know. It was in the 80s, and I'm not quite sure how tight contractual situations were. They probably weren't a bit looser than they are these days, probably. Yeah. So that was the only thing that my family had left, was our home.
Yeah.
That was it. And so when I reflect on it, I was talking to somebody about it one day. I can't even remember who it was. It might have been Maureen Johnson, who's a mortgage choice broker, or was in a mortgage choice business on the East Coast. And the security that I find in property is linked to that relationship that I have with that home. Yeah. So when I reflect on my life now and on my career, I've spent my adult life helping, supporting and mentoring people to buy property, because property is the pathway to financial security. And so in my mind, that home, firstly, do you want to go home, which was go home to Australia. So Australia was my home.
Yeah.
And that house in Guildford was all my family had left.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Dad, essentially, Mum and Dad had to start all over again. Yeah. And so now when I hear people complain about stuff, living in the greatest country in the world, you know, oh, the Victorian government introduced land tax, oh, they're charging me stamp duty, oh, you know, got to pay tax on this. And you know, I complain about some of that stuff too. Yeah. But when you sit back and you reflect upon some of the challenges that other people have had around the world and other people have today, mate, we have nothing to complain about. This is an amazing country.
Well, you take yourself back 40 years for Tony on the bus to Tripoli. It's a vastly different life.
It is.
Vastly different.
I'm very grateful to my parents for, you know, making the decision originally to come out here and then making the decision to leave their family a second time and come back out here.
And come home.
And come home. Yeah. So,
Wow.
So that's what home means to me.
Tell you what, I've done a few episodes now, and that's probably the most moving home one I've had.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean it to be too emotional. I'm an emotional character, as you know, but I think, you know, now being a father and watching my kids grow, you know, anyone who's a parent knows the responsibility that you bear for your children, and what my parents must have gone through making some of those really difficult life decisions. And now being in this amazing place, in this amazing country. Pretty cool.
Very cool. And I kind of just even peeling it back one layer, and you go, well, property's clearly evident in terms of security, and you've managed to build a good property portfolio, and then having a home as part of that, but also entrepreneurship. Yeah. And we go, well, hang on a second. Personally, you've built a good portfolio, and professionally, you've built a really successful business. And you go, well, hang on. Thanks, Dad.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say. Yeah, my dad used to always have this thing about, you know, he'd say it in Arabic, you know, which was, well, you're not going to turn out like the neighbours. Right? So that was his version of the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of meaning and clarity in that, and you know, it's pretty clear that generally you're a product of your environment, you know, in one way or another.
Yeah, and I guess if we're then going towards both professionally and personally, I mentioned to people that I was catching up with you today, and people that have never met you were excited for me to talk to you. That's the kind of I was going, hang on a second, and one of those reasons was because you see a lot of media, and obviously social media does this to people now, where it's so-and-so's bought 10 properties by the time they're 30, 20 properties by the time they're 50, whatever it might be. And you never really meet many people, truly meet them, that have actually done it. Yeah. And some of the time you go, is Todd and Sue real? Do they even exist? And then I met you. Yeah. And I went, okay, it is real. Yeah. You can do it, and it's something that is possible, and it's obviously hard.
It's hard,
no doubt about that. And you're clearly taking action when other people aren't, and so there's a lot in there. But tell me about your property journey.
I didn't really know much about property as a young man. What I do remember is that any of my mates who had money, who grew up in wealthy families, built their wealth in property. Yeah. Most of them were developers, property development. And I thought that property development was where the only way you could become wealthy through property. As I grew older and started to understand the industry more, I realised that wasn't actually the case. There's active ways to make money in property and there are passive ways to make money in property. And the active ways typically carry a much bigger risk, and it all depends on your risk profile and, lots of other different variables. But what I did learn from some of the people that I met along the way, I'm very grateful for lots of the mentors that I met, some that are still with us and some that aren't, is that there's nothing more important than action. Yeah. So there's a line that Gavin put in our presentation that you might have seen when we did the briefing. He said that intelligence in our society, intelligence is overrated and action is underrated. And if you think about that as a concept, just take some action. No one wants to be the smartest poor person in the room. And although money isn't everything, it certainly helps, certainly makes life a little bit easier, certainly gives you the opportunity to provide more for the people that you love. And so from my perspective, action is everything.
It's funny you mentioned that. One of the best brokers in the country, Aaron Christie David, has a great something that he says all the time, and it's the property market rewards action takers and decision makers. And as soon as I heard that, I went, "That's perfect. Yeah, it's exactly right."
Yeah, absolutely. And it rewards patience. It rewards those who will hold their nerve, because fear is the biggest killer of wealth. There's no question. The fear of making a decision, the fear of getting in, the fear of what's going to happen in the market, the fear of the political landscape, the fear of interest rate rises, the fear of a bad tenant. There's a lot of fear. I can give you 1,000 reasons every month why someone shouldn't buy a property. Yeah. And maybe I can give you 5 why they should. But, it's pretty clear. Those who commit and commit for the long term are the ones who ultimately are rewarded. Yeah.
And what made you keep committing?
I don't know. I'm an obsessive character, so I know that for me, once I commit to something, I'm just all in. Yeah. Now, if you ask my wife, it drives her crazy in a lot of ways, because I am obsessive, and I've got a million things going on at the same time, and I'm always just taking action. They say that if you want to we want something done, give it to a busy person. That, unfortunately, that's me. But I think I had great mentors that got me into that position of building the courage and working out the knowledge that I needed to make good decisions. And then I ended up adopting this position where I became that person for other people. And it was almost like, hey, I'm going to go down this path. You watch me do it and follow me. Yeah. So I almost like took this leadership mentoring role
Trailblazer
for the people around me. Yeah. This young son of ethnic immigrants, who, grew up in a loving household, but with not much, I never felt like we were poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy. Yeah. So yeah, that was sort of a key driver as to just accomplish things, just commit and see where it can take you.
And now you're here, and without disclosing much, where you say that last year, or every year for the last 25 years, you've committed.
Yeah, I bought a property every year for 23 straight years. So, and I think, and I'm happy to disclose that, because for me, the reason I am here where I am today in my life, and in a lot of things, not just property, but in life and in fatherhood and in friendships, is because I took the example of people who I wanted to be. I always say, never take advice from someone who you don't want to be. Yeah. So that was really important for me, and I built the courage to continue down the path that I had committed to. And if you think about what's happened in the last 23 years, recessions and interest rates up and down, and GFCs and COVIDs and, Donald Trump's and Ukraine wars and Israeli-Palestinian wars and leadership changes and, political scandal, everything. And there's 2 types of people in the world. I'm sure you've heard me say this before. There's those who look for reasons to do things and those who look for reasons not to do things. And I'm the former. I'm always looking for a reason to do things. So.
Because you can only be one of the two.
You can only be one of the two, really.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
And I guess, as you mentioned, advice, you're in that position now and you have been for a while. If there was somebody that was listening that was, how do I start this journey? I've got one property. What should I do next?
At the risk of talking you up, Michael, for me, the most important person in my wealth creation journey was, at the time, my bank manager, who these days would be more of your broker. Because your ability to build an asset base the size of the one that I've built really comes down to your ability to get money from the bank. You can't get money from the bank, you're not buying that many properties. It's pretty simple, yeah? And so then strategically getting the right advice around, structures and income and assessments and all that kind of stuff to make sure that I can maximize my position. Yeah. And I always say, for those skeptics that are watching, if I started today, I own 37 properties, 36 of them are investments, one of them is my home. If I started today, would I have 36 investment properties in the next 23 years? I don't think I would, because lending has changed. And in the early days, as you may or may not remember, if you had equity and a pulse, you could get a loan.
I started just after that.
Just after that, yeah. So in the early days, if I had a bit of equity, bang, I was off, mate. I could just keep getting money. Yeah. And of course, that post-GFC period where the world moved from a profit focus to a risk focus, essentially shifted that. And then, of course, we rolled a few years, and then we rolled into the Royal Commission, which made it even tighter. So there's no question that it's much more difficult these days. And the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people is critical, Never have a mortgage broker who doesn't invest in property. Never have an accountant who doesn't invest in property. Yeah? Like, it's crazy. Some vacuum cleaner guy's trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner. Was this the vacuum cleaner you use? No, I don't use this vacuum cleaner, but you should. Well, doesn't make any sense.
There's so many parts to unpack there, because you're talking about structure, you're talking about using lenders, you're talking about assessment rates, and they're all so vastly different. But one thing I know is true is that anyone that I help that has had good advice, especially from an accountant or a broker or whatever it might be, it all actually looks very similar. Yeah. It actually is quite similar. Yeah. And you're talking about anything to do with structure and entities, and you go, oh, you've got that? Oh, so do I. Oh, and so does that person who I also know has done well. So it's very interesting you mentioned that. I guess that kind of guides us down to that path of really good advice. And I remember talking to you when we were at MCG, and that's when we were talking about family and property and whatnot. I thought, this guy's someone I want to get to know, but also the story around Blue Wealth. Because I remember you saying one of the things you're most proud of, and we'll touch on being proud, but one of the things you're most proud of is keeping all of your staff through COVID. Yeah. I don't even know if you remember saying that, but that's something I resonated with and thought, this is someone I want to get to know. But Blue Wealth Property, talk to me about it. It's obviously your fourth baby.
Yep.
And
it is.
It's something.
It was my third baby. Because Sarah was born 6 months into Blue Wealth's existence. So sort of had two babies at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's the Blue Wealth baby.
Yeah. And where is it today? Where's it come from? And what does Blue Wealth Property, what does it do?
Well, I think if we roll it back to the sort of childhood conversation, really, for me, I want to inspire people to drive themselves to better financial positions for themselves and for their family. I want to be responsible for that, because I know that I am where I am today because some people inspired me to push harder, find solutions, learn new things, take some risks. That's how I ended up, building what I've built with my family. Yeah. So I left uni. I did, as you well know, my studies are actually in organisational psychology. I ended up in business consulting. One of my clients was a property developer, and so to cut a long journey short, that's how I came to be in property. one of my partners in the property development business was an incredible teacher, John. He was awesome. He taught me a hell of a lot. And what I did realise at the time, I didn't want to be a property developer, but I love property. And so I ended up working with this financial planner. I'm not a big fan of financial planners. They're unfortunately, they've got their hands tied, and most of them don't understand property, and some of them are brilliant, but most of them are not. Morris Goldberg. And still to this day, when I look back, he's a man who changed my life. What I learned from him on a number of different levels. Yeah. He ended up leaving financial planning. Didn't suit his personality at all, by the way. Ended up being an artist. It's what he does now. He's an amazing human being. But he essentially wanted to use research to make property investment, to find property investment solutions for his clients. Right, which was very adventurous for a financial planner, and something that was relatively new. These days, some businesses have their own AFSLs, and so therefore they have a property solution. Most of them absolutely don't. Yeah. And so I ended up working with him. He was very much a visionary rather than a businessman, I would say, and I reckon he would agree with that. But he taught me a hell of a lot about the concept of using science and logic to buy assets, not emotion. I move away from the emotion and use the science, because that's how you make decisions, right? Based on the data.
This is all piecing together into exactly what I expected it to be. I just didn't know where the pieces came from.
That's where they came from. And so, unfortunately, as I said, he was a great visionary, but, a better visionary than he was a businessman. So he and his partner at the time had some pretty big ambitions for what was a business called Arc Financial. And Arc Financial was a financial planning, property, finance, marketing. There was a few different things. And it was a very top-heavy business with, a sort of, a weird P&L. Anyway, when the GFC hit, some debt got called in, and ended up going into administration. I had 2 young sons and a pregnant wife. This is late 2008. So Joseph was 2, Ben was 1. And now I was in a business, and the new guy came in, the administrator, the angel, and said to me, Tony, because I was running the property business in there, the property investment business, Pulse Property it was called at the time. And he said to me, you have to forego all of the commission that you're owed. And by the way, it was more than $500,000 back then, because I was foregoing all of my income for a couple of years because the business was financially struggling. I'll be like, just pay all the bills. I'll be fine. In the end, sort of bit me on the backside. And we need to cut your wages in half, right? And I'm like, what? Why would I do that? He's like, well, that's the offer that's on the table. I said, well, I'll just go and do my own thing. And he's like, well, you can't do your own thing. Yeah. I said, why not? He said, because you got a contract. I said, no, I don't. And I didn't have a contract, right? Because I've always been a man of my word. I shake your hand. What I say is what I'm going to do, right? So I left there. 4 or 5 of the staff came with me, who were my staff. They were very loyal to me. One of them is still with me, 16 years later, Marisol. And we started Blue Wealth. And it just goes to show the goodwill that you put out into the world will one day come back. I called some friends and said, listen, I need an office. And one of my mates, Johnny, said to me, come and use one next to me. The office next to me it's just got rubbish in it. Clear it out, clean it up, do whatever you want with it. You can have it rent-free for 6 months. Right? So that was in Parramatta, Hunter Street, Parramatta. And I called another mate of mine who were panel beaters, Alan and Warren, and I said to them, I need some money. I need to cash flow this business. And I said, I'm happy to pay. I'm happy to pay interest on the money. And they're like, don't be stupid. How much do you need? Give us your bank account. They transferred money in, no questions asked, no contract, no loan agreement, nothing. Right? And then when I paid it back with interest. And Alan came to the office with a check for the interest, and basically with a few choice words, a few F-bombs, said, if you ever do that again, so the kind of, the love you put out in the world will come back to you. And I'm a really big believer in that. And so, that's how it all started. And sometimes, Michael, when you don't have a plan B plan A has to work. Yeah.
I know that all too well. I know exactly.
And
what
so
you
for
mean.
me, I've always been a bit like that. Yeah. No plan B.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a plan B, it's unlikely plan A is going to work. Yeah. And, you know, it's that people use lots of different lines, you know, to reflect that kind of thought process. But for me, fortune favours the brave.
Certainly does. Yeah. What does Blue Wealth Property do?
So Blue Wealth Property essentially uses a research methodology. It's the only independently audited research methodology in the country to identify the growth areas in the country to help investors invest. And the way that I built the business was through a network of referral partners, of which most of them are brokers. So it's essentially helping brokers to help their clients invest in property. We're Sydney-based. We have a national footprint. We've got clients all over the country. We've got clients overseas. Lots of Aussie expats who are investing back in Australia. You know, I'm here in Perth now with one of my teammates, Roy, checking out some of the houses that our clients bought over here in Perth that have made a lot of money over the last 18 months. So it's essentially trying to support Aussies to make decisions about buying property. And the more information you give them and the more secure they feel, the more likely they are to make a decision. Yeah. And so that's what we do.
It's funny because that's so true. And then there's this other part that when I shook your hand and met you, I went, well, if Tony tells me to buy here, I'm buying here. So there's also because I started talking to my wife, Mom, this is what we're going to do. And she goes, what have you seen? I went, I don't know, I just shook Tony's hand and I'm doing it. She goes, well, how about you do some more research? I went, it's okay. It's okay.
And that does happen a lot, particularly with those clients who have bought a property through us already. So I get a lot of messages. Tony, I want to buy another property. Can you tell me what to buy? Yeah. And then literally I'll put a property onto their microsite, which is the web, you know, our tech, their website. They'll look at it and we'll send them the paperwork. They'll buy it and thanks for coming. They don't look at it. They don't see it. They don't even want to know what it is. Yeah. It's bizarre because, you know, at the end of the day, trust is such a big part of business. And unfortunately these days it's dissipating, you know, as social media and, you know, other influences take over the messaging and the way people make decisions, you know.
I see that as a big problem within two parts of the industry. One is the broking space. I feel that the broking space has exploded and there's a lot of people that don't have the right experience and knowledge to advise people on lending, which could be a concern at some point. And the second is the massive surge in buyer's agents. And no doubt you've seen or heard of plenty of them. And you've got ones that have bought in Perth in the last 12 months. Pretty easy to say that they've done well for clients. Yep. You then look forward and go, who takes ownership of a market if you buy in it and it doesn't go so well? Yeah. And you've been in a business long enough that you've seen plenty of cycles. Absolutely. And you've clearly got personal and professional experience in that. How do you go explaining or talking to clients that have bought in an area that might not have done as well as they were hoping?
Yeah, awesome. Great question too. So I gave, I don't know if you remember, I don't think you were there, but I was at the MoneyQuest conference in Melbourne. Might have been last year.
Yeah,
were you there?
I was there with you.
And remember
we sat
that,
next to each other.
Remember that? That's right, at the dinner.
Yeah, the dinner.
I just remembered that when you said it. So when I gave that, the talk, one of the keynotes, it was essentially, I asked the crowd the question, what do you think my number one job is? You know, we're 25 staff and, you know, we're looking after thousands of investors. And I said, my number one job is managing people's emotions. Yeah? Because one of the things that we teach people when it comes to property is that nobody knows exactly when a market's going to move. And so you have to commit to holding your property for the long term. And don't get caught up in the noise because there's a lot of noise. Yeah. And if I'll give you two examples, let's forget Perth because Perth's made everybody look like a genius, right? Everybody can do that. It's easy. You know, if we go back to Western Sydney in 2011, we've got ploughing our clients into Western Sydney and everyone was making fun of us. Oh, these guys are ripping their clients off. I'm like, of course, Western Sydney went crazy. The clients made a fortune. But two more recent examples. Brisbane. yeah, that really was stuck in the mud for a number of years. And we put a lot of clients into
Almost
Brisbane
decade.
based on some amazing fundamentals. Yeah, 8 of my properties are in Brisbane, and I love them. And I'm going to give you an example of one particular client, right? I was having a chat with her about buying about holding a property that she'd bought in her super fund. She was, starting to get towards retirement. She'd paid $420 or something for this 1-bedroom apartment in a beautiful, amazing suburb called Newstead. And she bought it because that's what suited her SMSF. Yeah. Anyway, she held it. A few years passed and it wasn't really doing anything. It was rented the whole time and it was a fantastic. I'm like, so do I just hold it. You don't need to sell it. Yeah. It'll come. She sold it for $450, $460. Didn't make much money. By the time we paid stamp duty and paid the agent or whatever, she made a little bit of money, but bugger all in the scheme of what you're trying to achieve with a property, right? Almost to the day, the market turned, right? 18 months later, the identical apartment upstairs from her sold for $705. I'm like, so yeah, it's that old thing, as soon as you sell, the market moves. Always seems to happen to you. Yeah. But that's one example. So those people who persisted and held their nerve through that period of where Brisbane wasn't really doing anything are now all basking in the glory of their patience. Yeah, it rewarded them for their patience. And of course, along the way, a lot of people jumped out. Yeah. No, it's never going to move. It's a rubbish market. I should have put my money there. I should have done this. I should have done that. Should have bought a house in my own suburb. Well, hang on a second. You spent $450 here. Your house in your suburb is $1.5 million. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
And if you roll the clock forward, that market is now Melbourne. Yeah, fundamentally, in my mind, the best market in the country. Yeah, it's showing incredible value. I own, as you know, lots of property in Melbourne, and I love it. When I look at it, I can just see what's coming. Because I've been there, and I look at property markets through different eyes. But a lot of people that bought there are nervous. And of course, through that period, unlike Brisbane, through that period, a lot of them have had interest rate increases. Rents have gone crazy, but not enough to cover. Yeah. And so now we're starting to see some green shoots in Melbourne. Yeah, for the data starting to turn the other way slightly. And, some people said to me when I was in Melbourne last week, what do you think is going to happen to the market? And I said, I can tell you what is not going to happen. Then prices are not going to get cheaper. So anyone who wants to make money in Melbourne now should be doubling down. Yeah. So managing people's emotions through those periods where the markets aren't obvious is the most difficult part of my job. The people who bought in Perth, they want to marry my children, they want to marry me, they want to marry my staff. The people who bought on the Sunshine Coast and had immediate uplift, and sometimes markets they reward you quickly, and sometimes they don't. Yeah. And that's the patience that you need in order to create real wealth. Yeah. As you said right at the beginning, it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard. And it's interesting talking to clients that bought 12 months ago in Perth and getting valuations done again. And they're going, my place has gone up 200 grand. Not quite, hasn't sold, but 200 grand, we have an ability to do something with that. Yeah. And they go, this is easy.
Yeah. How good am I?
Yeah.
But again, but I do say to people that do that, I'm like, good on you.
Yeah.
Pat yourself on the back because you took action. If you didn't take action, you wouldn't have. Yep. And the reality is before that period where it's gone up 200 grand, Perth did nothing for a decade. What about all those people that dumped or didn't hold or sold or... Now, if they'd done that strategically and shifted their money to another market and made money there, okay. But that also carries risk. It's hard to trade property because you're paying on the way out, you're paying on the way in. Yeah. So.
It's a discussion we had around our place down south where I said, Tony, look, I'm thinking of selling down here so we can go over here. And you say, well, can you go over here without selling here? I went, yeah. You went, we'll go do that. I went,
how much has that grown now, south?
Yeah, it's done all right. It's done all right.
So, unless you're selling strategically, I'm not a fan of selling at all, to be honest. I'm yet to meet an Aussie that goes, I'm really glad I sold that property. There's a hell of a lot more of us that say, I wish I'd never sold that property.
Yeah. It's everyone's a property expert until you actually meet an expert and you go, actually.
Yeah.
You've spoken about some really influential people in your life, And I'd love to know where you turn to now for knowledge, research, guidance. Is there any one in particular, any books in particular? Like, is there any?
Not really. I find myself now with a shorter and shorter attention span as I keep describing. My memory is just failing me these days. And I keep saying to my wife, my head's like a filing cabinet. You know, stuff's going in, so other stuff's coming out.
Well, you put a lot in there.
Its capacity is full, you know. And so I do get a lot of, you know, unfortunately, I'm always on my phone. I'm working on my phone. I'm talking to people on my phone. I'm, you know, replying to emails on my phone. At night, I read on my phone. I play Supercoach with my sons. I'm on my phone. But I do get a lot of inspiration now and bits and pieces from articles I'm reading. And so, you know, now we've got access to so much that I find myself grabbing a bit from here and a bit from there and a bit from there. So, and what I've found now as I've matured is that I'm getting a lot of inspiration from places people don't typically get their inspiration from, and that's the people that are, you know, not deemed to be as experienced or as wise or as influential or whatever. You know, I get a lot of inspiration from my staff. I get a lot of inspiration from, you know, from my workmates, from my children, you know, from my brother and my sister. Like things you don't really, you know, sometimes you're sitting there and someone says something, you're like, no, that, you know, I can see how that can apply to work or what, you know, it's, so I'm at that old man age now where I'm sort of taking things that are from different contexts and applying them to the context that's most relevant to me. And I really do appreciate the brief conversations I have with my wife about stuff, you know, and a lot of the time she doesn't even respond. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't need to, but she doesn't work in the business. And so having her as a non-property, non-in-the-business person is very helpful. Yeah. But I'm a deep thinker. I never switch off, so I'm constantly, and then I'll have an idea and I'll go into the office and I'll call 3 or 4 people in the room, you know, and I'll say, right, this is what I'm thinking, and then we'll brainstorm it. Most of them are good ideas, some of them are crap ideas, you know. And so the evolution of Blue Wealth over the last few months has been very exciting for us, and so you know, the landscape. We've only ever sold new property, and so the landscape of new property in this environment where construction costs have exploded has changed. Yeah, the environment has changed. And so now we've become a business that almost can't serve the purpose for which I started the business, which is to help Australians build wealth through property. And so now a lot of people can't afford to buy new property because it's too expensive, right? Even the ones that represent good value, which are the ones our research model is finding. And so last year we started reselling some of the properties that our clients had bought that they're selling strategically to pay down debt or to you know, buy something else or retire or whatever. And we're now building a technology that is going to allow us to go into the buyer's agency space, but not be a buyer's agent in the traditional sense. But essentially overlay the research methodology on a scraping system. This is the way it's explained. I understand it. Yeah. That essentially scrapes the internet and real estate sites and finds the best property to match the research methodology. It'll be industry changing. Yeah, and so we're pretty excited about that.
I saw an AI model that was able to do that the other day, and that tech is here and ready, and it's quite amazing that it's being adopted.
And the challenge with the AI, of course, is AI is rubbish in, rubbish out.
Yeah.
So you need to know what to ask it. You need to know what research characteristics to apply to it, and so that's the uniqueness of what Blue Wealth can offer that other people can't just go and do themselves. Otherwise, jump on realestate.com. You know you want to buy in this area. You've heard Perth is good. Why don't you go buy your own property? Yeah. Well, number one, does it meet the research criteria that we're after? Number two, who's going to negotiate the deal for you? Yeah. It's a fair chance if Blue Wealth negotiates it, you're going to end up with a much cheaper price. And so that's where we're going. And
that's exciting.
It is very exciting. I'm pumped about it. Like for me, It's about making sure that we're always true to what Blue Wealth is all about.
Yeah.
And that's helping Australians secure their financial future with property. Yeah.
Simple.
Got to make sure. Yeah. At the Frank Panisi is the general manager of football at the Melbourne Storm. And for those, obviously, a lot of your followers will be AFL people. For those who don't know the Melbourne Storm, they're almost the Geelong of the AFL. Always there or thereabouts. Win a premiership every few years. Have had the same coach. He's won round one for like 22 years in a row or something. Have been in the top four, probably 16 of. I'm making it up, but 16 of the last 20 years. Missed the finals twice. Some crazy bit of data, right?
It sounds like you're actually thinking of dropping the Bulldogs and moving to Storm.
Not a chance, mate. Not a chance. But Frank Panisi is the man behind Craig Bellamy. So Craig Bellamy is the coach. Frank Panisi is the general manager of football. Arguably, people could argue he's the greatest general manager of football of all time. Yeah. He was a guest speaker at the Melbourne PD Day. And they were talking about, someone asked him a question about what's so special about Craig and the Melbourne Storm and how you guys been at the top and da-da-da-da. And they said it was interesting because we were at a presentation one day and we heard the speaker say this line that really resonated with us. And everyone's like, oh, what was that line? He said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I'm like, what? So when you sit there and you think about that, it's so simple. The main thing is to keep the main thing, right? Remember what your business is all about. Remember what the main thing is and make sure that the main thing is to keep that thing at the core of what you're trying to achieve. And at Blue Wealth, that's about helping Australians invest in good property.
That's fantastic.
It's pretty simple, And you think about that in relationship to your own business.
Yeah.
Yeah. To this podcast. To the listeners and whatever their businesses are. Yeah. It's remarkable stuff.
And it's also quite easy to understand if you're a rugby league player as well.
Correct. Yeah. That was the other thing that he said. He said one of the keys to Craig Bellamy's success has been the simplicity upon which he approaches the game. Yeah. And he said to the players, know your job, respect your job, do your job. That's it. Know your job. What is your job? Yeah. Respect it. Yeah. So, sometimes you've got staff or whatever, they know what their job is, but they don't respect it. They don't want to do it. They don't like it. They don't love it. They don't understand their place in it. Why should, you can see it, in any organisation, whether it's a sporting team or a business or whatever. Yeah. So not only do they have to know their job, but they have to respect their job, and then they've got to do it. Yeah. Yeah. And so if you think about that organisation being at the top of its game for two decades is actually beyond belief. Yeah. In a salary cap era. Yeah.
And it's amazing that something so simple can resonate with so many different aspects of life. So many. I've loved today. I knew it was going to be good, and it has certainly done that for me. The way I love to finish this is around being proud of ourselves, and something that we're trying to teach our 5-year-old is being proud of themselves. And I think being able to vocalise that and not be shut down by any sort of tall poppy syndrome, I think is really special and important. You've done a lot. You've seen a lot. What are some things that come to mind when I say, what's Tony proud of? Professionally, personally, whatever it might be.
I think, again, the things that come straight to mind are obviously, I'm proud of the people that my children have grown into, because as a father, in today's day and age with the influences that are around, that's not easy. And also, my kids didn't grow up the same way I did, where I had to sort of fight for what I had, and they've grown up in a privileged, wealthy household. Yeah? So keeping that sense of humility and understanding that nobody in the world is better than anyone else, and certainly not because of money. It's something that the kids have always understood, and treat people the way you want to be treated is pretty amazing. And so my kids have turned into 3 really good people. So that's the thing I'm most proud of. I've been married for 20 years. I'm pretty proud of that. Anyone who's married knows, that it's not easy. Yeah. Certainly harder for her than it is for me. And I'm also what you mentioned earlier. When I look back on my career, that period of COVID where we all went in blind, not knowing what was going to happen, and being able to keep all of my staff, was something that I'll forever be grateful for. I was in the car when ScoMo announced JobKeeper, and love him or hate him, or whatever side of politics you're on, I felt like he helped me keep my business and keep my staff. And when I was driving and I was by myself, and I just burst into tears, like I was sobbing. And I don't think I realised how much tension or stress I was carrying for the responsibilities of 24, 25 families, including my own, of course. And testament to my team, I went to them and I said, listen, we either need to get rid of 5 or 6 people, or we're all going to take a 25% pay cut. And every single one of them said, no, we'll take a pay cut. So we all took a 25% pay cut. I took a 50% pay cut because I wanted to lead from the front. And then at the end of the year, we ended up having a relatively good year, and the business was able to pay everybody back, and that was at the Christmas party. That was all pretty cool. But none of them knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
They all took a hit for their mate.
Yeah.
And that, for me, I'm really proud of that culture.
Yeah, because you just don't develop that overnight.
No, absolutely not.
And finishing it up, you're an influencer, and people that I know love you because of your handle on Instagram. So if anyone is listening to this or watching it,
Tony's Thirsty, funny bloke.
We have Tony's Thirsty in the room. You didn't even know that's who it is, and this is the man. So if you
people don't know what I look like, because if you get onto Tony's Thirsty, nobody knows what I look like. I've never shown my face on there. I think I might change that at some point, but I've never shown my face on
We've just done it.
I don't care that much. I just always, Tony's Thirsty started as something to do in lockdown.
Yeah.
So I started it in 2020.
Yeah.
I've built the cellar of my dreams in the house of my dreams when we built our home. And we had a lot of time on our hands. And my niece, who was in PR, says to me one day, you should start a wine page. I did this video and put it on my own Instagram. Yeah. She's like, you should start a wine page. So I started a wine page, and all my friends started following me, and then other people started following me. And next thing you know, there's 5,000 people following me and 10,000 people. And I'm like, what?
It's 20,000.
Yeah, it's now 22,000 odd. And it's pretty cool, Now people are, now there are wine companies that reach out to me and offer me things to offer people that follow me. And I love that. Like, now I'm able to give my community stuff. Like, I posted something today.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty cool. And the other day I got a message from my wife whose husband was turning 40.
Yeah.
And she said to me, Tony, I want to buy my husband a really special gift, and can you help me? And anyway, I helped her. I ended up using a discount that I had at Hentley Farm.
Yeah.
And buying it for her and sending it to her. And then she paid for it. It was really cute, but I got a 25% discount. So I got it within her budget.
Yeah.
And then she asked me to make her husband a video. So cute. I'm like, who the hell am I to be making some random bloke who doesn't even know what I look like a video?
That's great.
So, the world of social media is a pretty incredible place. And then it was his birthday on Sunday. So I then took a video of the same wine that I have at home, telling him that his wife was scheming behind his back. And that, she was really cute, and, I hope he enjoyed his birthday party, whatever. And then he sent me a message yesterday saying, mate, I really appreciate it. That was so cool. It made my day. I'm like, it's a bit awkward. Like, I feel awkward because I'm like, mate, I'm a nobody. It's your 40th birthday.
I just like wine.
Yeah. But it's really cool to be able to teach people what I've learnt over the years about wine, So it's a bit of a passion thing. I love it.
I love it as well. So following along for the ride, that's for sure.
Love it.
Thanks, Tony.
Can't wait to get you in there.
You are a really good man, and I'm really pleased that we've met each other, we've got to know each other, and then you've come on the podcast, so thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening and being a part of our community at That Backyard Property Podcast. We would love it if you could like, comment, or even share with a family member or a friend that might get something useful from today's episode. We can't wait to see you again next Tuesday.